In the 9th through 7th centuries BC, the area that came to be the Roman Forum was a low, swampy ground at the foot of several of the hills of Rome. You see in this illustration the 7 hills. The arrow points to the area that would become the Forum. This area served as an acropolis for the inhabitants of the surrounding hills. It would not become usable until the construction of the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, in the 6th century BC, which drained the swamp. Once the swamp was drained, the Romans began to erect some of their most important buildings there. During the time of the Roman Republic, 6th to 1st centuries BC, the Roman Forum became the religious, political, commercial, and judicial hub of the city. Temples, law courts, basilicas, shrines, and various memorial structures started to crowd out one another in the limited space of the Forum. By the time of the Empire, 1st century BC, Rome's rulers found it necessary to build new fora, the imperial fora, to alleviate the congestion of the Roman Forum. As old buildings decayed, they were rebuilt on the same spot but in a more modern style. Some old structures were demolished to make way for new ones, and some were even moved. The decay of the Roman Forum began in the 6th century AD with the Byzantine and Ostrogothic wars. By the Middle Ages, the Forum was deserted and overgrown. It was known as the cow's pasture. We'll begin our walking tour on the east end of the Forum at the Arch of Constantine. We'll walk by the Temple of Venus in Rome, go through the Arch of Titus, stop at the Basilica of Constantine, and then make our way west to the Curia. At the west end of the Forum, we'll make a turn at the Arch of Septimius Severus, and then turn back to the east, passing the Basilica Julia, and then going to the Temple of Vesta and the House of the Vestal Virgins. The buildings of the Roman Forum date from the 6th century BC to the 7th century AD. The Temple of Venus in Rome stands on a high brick podium. It was designed by the Emperor Hadrian in 135 AD. The temple has a double apse to hold statues of Roma and Venus, the goddess of love, or Amor in Latin, thus forming a palindrome, Roma, Amor. Here is the colonnade and eastern apse of the Temple of Venus in Rome. The Arch of Titus was built to commemorate Titus's victory over the Jewish rebels in 71 AD. This relief depicts Titus's triumphal return to Rome crowned by a winged victory. In this relief, Roman soldiers carry the loot from the Temple of Jerusalem. Here we see the apotheosis, or deification of Titus. He's carried to the gods on the back of an eagle. A 17th century painting shows the Arch of Titus incorporated into a medieval tower. The Basilica of Constantine from 315 AD. This is a piece of the coffered brick and concrete ceiling which has fallen to the ground. The basilica was begun by Maxentius, who was overthrown by Constantine. Constantine then reoriented the basilica with a northern apse and southern entrance. In this photo, we see the northern apse from the exterior. Here we have fragments of the colossal statue of Constantine that once stood in the basilica. This is the medieval portico, dating probably to the 10th century AD. Its function is uncertain. Note the difference in the ground levels. The ground level of Roman times is below, where you see the people walking, and of medieval times is the portico. The octagonal temple of Romulus was built by Maxentius in 310 AD in honor of his deceased son Romulus. The original bronze doors of the temple, these served as a vestibule to the church of Saints Cosmas and Damian in Christian times. This temple was built in honor of the Emperor Antoninus Pius and his wife Faustina, 141 AD. The temple was turned into the church of San Lorenzo in Miranda in the Middle Ages. The grass areas mark the spots where 5 meters lower ancient cremation burials were unearthed by archaeologists. Hut urns similar to these were found in the cemetery. They date to the 9th to 6th centuries BC, when the Forum was still a swamp. Here we have the foundations of the Regia, the house of the king, from 575 BC. Julius Caesar was cremated in the Roman Forum in 44 BC. On the site of the cremation, a shrine was built in his honor. Of the original temple, only the semicircular apse remains, the spot of the cremation. Here we have the ruins of the temple of the divine Julius. You see before you the reconstructed brick shops of the Basilica Aemilia, 179 BC. The basilica was an irregular-shaped covered hall in which the money changers conducted their business. It burned down in 410 AD. The ruins of the hall of the Basilica Aemilia. This frieze, showing the death of Tarpeia, comes from the Basilica Aemilia and dates to 80 BC. The Curia, or Senate building, is the large brick building adjacent to the Basilica Aemilia. The original Curia dated to the earliest days of Rome. The current building dates to 283 AD. Here we have the interior of the Curia. The building was turned into the Church of San Adriano in the 6th century and restored to its original condition in 1938. Back in the Forum, the Lapis Niger, or black stone, marked one of the most sacred spots of ancient Rome. Beneath the Lapis Niger were unearthed a number of ancient monuments dated to the 6th century BC. The earliest Latin inscription from the 6th century BC was found beneath the Lapis Niger. The inscription, though imperfectly understood, seems to mention a curse, a king, and a heifer. The Decennalia, from 303 AD, once supported a column that honored Diocletian, Maximian, Galerius, and Chlorus, the tetrarchs. The long rectangular rostra was the orator's platform in the Roman Forum. Rostra means beaks in Latin, so called from the ramming beaks of enemy ships that once adorned the front of the rostra. We continue through the Forum along the Sacred Way, which leads towards the Arch of Septimius Severus. The Arch of Septimius Severus dates to 203 AD. The arch depicts the victories of the emperor in the eastern provinces of the empire. The Umbilicus Urbis Romae, or the navel of the city of Rome, marks the exact center of the city. The Milliarium Aureum, the golden milestone, marks the spot from which roads in the empire were measured. You see here the columns of the Temple of Saturn, one of the oldest temples of Rome. This reconstruction dates from the 4th century AD. The Temple of Vespasian, from the late 1st century AD. Here we have the Corinthian capitals and entablature of the Temple of Vespasian. Behind the 3 columns of the Temple of Vespasian is the Tablinum, or record hall of ancient Rome. Today it serves as the foundation for medieval and modern buildings. The colonnade of the Portico of the Gods once held gilt bronze statues of the Olympian gods. In the year 608, the Emperor Phocas bequeathed the Pantheon to Pope Boniface IV to use as a church. To honor Phocas, the Pope erected the Column of Phocas, the last ancient monument to be erected in the Roman Forum. Next we have the foundations of the Basilica Julia, 1st century BC. The Basilica Julia, begun by Julius Caesar and completed by Augustus, was a large hypaethral court building with colonnades on all 4 sides. The Cloaca Maxima drained the Roman Forum in the 6th century BC and made it into usable real estate. The 19th century photograph shows the open Cloaca Maxima in the Roman Forum. At the bottom, we have the presently barred entrance to the Cloaca Maxima near the Basilica Julia. The Temple of Castor and Pollux was built in 484 BC to commemorate a military victory. The remaining 3 columns date to a 1st century AD rebuilding. The 3 columns of the temple always remained visible, at least partially, even after the rest of the forum became covered with soil and debris. A medieval road cutting through the forum, the cow's pasture, was known as the 3 Columns Way. The plan here shows the house of the Vestal Virgins, with the round temple of Vesta. The round temple of Vesta contained the sacred flame of the city of Rome. The temple has been partially reconstructed from old fragments and new stones. This is a coin showing Vesta, the flame of the hearth, in her temple. The shrine probably contained a statue of the goddess Vesta. Below you is the atrium of the house of the Vestal Virgins. Here we have the garden of that same atrium. This is a statue of a Vestal Virgin. In this photo, we see the Palatine Hill overlooking the Roman Forum. The 3 columns of the Temple of Castor and Pollux stand in the cow's pasture in the Middle Ages.